Another day in June, another day where we're trying to do something to engage with the natural world around us. And what I'm doing today is I've had in my garden last night a moth trap out, drawing in some various moths. And I thought we'd have a look at some of the more interesting ones or some of the more attractive ones this morning. I'm not going to go through absolutely everything because that would take quite a long time. But I thought we'd have a look at one or two of them and talk about those. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll go and have a look. So we'll start with a big, obvious and attractive one just in case it flies away. So this rather attractive species is known as an elephant hawk moth. The name elephant hawk moth comes from the larva, the caterpillar stage, which has a reasonable resemblance in some ways to an elephant's trunk, and also a reasonable resemblance to a snake, but the adult is this wonderful pink and green coloured creature. To give a sense of scale, there's my hand next to it. And although this looks really obvious and apparent sitting here on this bit of concrete, when these are perched up amongst lichens in the sort of shade and so on, they can actually be surprisingly well camouflaged during the day. So that's rather an attractive species. They're sitting there. We've got down here a garden carpet. It's a very common moth, but it's quite an attractive thing again. And again, it's got sort of a pattern there that's probably designed to break up the shape, make it camouflaged in a bit of shade, make it a bit less clear that this is obviously the pattern of a moth, because the dark bits and the white bits break up the pattern and just give it a bit of protective camouflage. Come down here, this moth, which hopefully you can see has a bit of a green colour to it, is a green pug. The pugs can be quite a difficult group to identify, but this one, because of its green colour and slightly larger size, is one of the easiest of the pugs to do. Another species, quite a famous moth, this is a peppered moth. This is the moth species that was used as a good example of evolution, where a dark form became much more prevalent when the trees and so on were covered in soot and black, and this peppered form, more typical form, became less common. The peppered form is becoming more and more common now, again, as presumably pollution has gone down and it's become much more prevalent. One or two that I've retained in pots, so I'm not sure how brilliantly these will photograph. This is something called an obscure wainscot. It's a species that seems to have become much more common here in the past, perhaps 10 years or so. Was regarded as quite a rare species, but seems fairly prevalent now. And I've seen that there are a few of the reed bed species in this area. This is a reed bed associated moth. That it's gone from being rather obscure, hence the name perhaps, and not seen very often, to something I get several times every year in several of the traps that I run locally in this area. Got sitting on here. This is rather an attractive creature, I think. This is a bee moth. Bee as in bee, the insect. And the larvae of this species, and caterpillars of this, are brood parasites on bumblebees. They live in the bumblebee nest, and they eat some of the paper, not the paper, the wax and structure that the bumblebees have made the nest out of, and they live on that. What else have we got that might be worth having a quick look at? Now this is something that, if you read all but the most recent literature on moths in Britain, this species was said to be just a rare migrant, perhaps occasionally resident right down on the south coast. Something called the L-album wainscot. But nearly all of that literature is out of date. This is a species that has colonised large swathes of southern Britain now. I got it for the first time in my garden, I think, a couple of years ago. It seems to show up every year since then. So L-album wainscot. So called because of that sort of L-shaped mark on the wing, I guess. Again, quite an attractive species, quite distinctive. Although the first time I saw one here in my garden, I was surprised. I'd only ever seen it before once in a trap right down on the south coast that somebody else had run, where it was picked up as one of those rare migrants. So that was rather nice, and rather nice to see another one this year. This I will need to look at properly later on. I suspect this is a scarce footman. Species of moth called the footman because the cloaks are said to resemble the footman. The wings are said to resemble the cloaks that domestic servants called footmen used to wear. But there is a rarer one called the hoary footman, which is pale, which this is. Scarce footman would have a bit of more obvious yellow on it. But you really have to look at the hind wing to be sure which of those it is. This is pale enough. I suspect it's going to prove to just be a worn scarce footman. But I will look at it properly a bit later on, just in case it is the much rarer hoary footman, which has been recorded here before, so it's not impossible. Are there any others that's worth having a look at? Well, here's a snout. My broadcast from the field a few nights ago had quite a few of these snouts over in Grove Farm, just up the road from here. But here's a chance to see one in slightly better light, I suppose. And then below it, there is a small blood vein. Again, a fairly common species. What else was on these? A scalloped oak moth. Rather attractive. And let's have a look at this one. This is, just want to focus on it, is it? Anania coronata, one of the micro moths, one of the larger micro moths. This is rather attractive patterns and markings and so on. So anyway, that's probably the main ones we're going to have a look at today. I wasn't going to go through absolutely everything on broadcast, just have a look at some of the more attractive things. Fairly brief broadcast. We'll end back here on this elephant hawk moth because it's a nice thing to end a broadcast on.